that is the sole source of knowledge is observation and experience, and that's also the basis of the verification of the veracity of also of the knowledge or knowledge claims. Okay, now the claim is that this empirical attitude according to the Quran is an indispensable stage. So there's a stage theory too there. So human spiritual life of humanity so there's the idea of stages, and I think what is implied is also the idea of progress. So presumably, Adam and Noah, they were at some sort of inferior stage of spiritual life because the empirical attitude hadn't come yet, hadn't been adopted yet. And if it is an indispensable stage in the spiritual life of humanity, then obviously they miss that stage. So there's the idea of progress. But in what sense empirical attitude is indispensable for the spiritual life of humanity? In what sense? That's the question. So-called empirical attitude is indispensable stage in the spiritual life of humanity. And as you can see, indispensable state here reminds us again of what we saw of Kant last time. And the general Enlightenment thinking that humanity was childlike in the earlier stages of human development, where they looked up to heavens for guidance. But once we reach the age of maturity, where we can use our own senses, use our own reason, according to Kant, then obviously we don't need the guidance from heavens, because we are adults now. We can, practice autonomy. We can lead. We can guide our own life, and that's the basic difference between autonomy and heteronomy in Kant. And it is only with autonomy that humans become actually human. So, in that sense, this type of spirituality, we can say that empirical attitude, or this sort of attitude which sees self-reliance of humanity as the indispensable stage in the development of humanity, that would regard this sort of stage as the indispensable stage in the spiritual life of humanity, in the sense that if by spirituality we mean maturity in the Kantian sense, that is human self-determination. That's autonomy for Kant. Humans are mature here because they can determine their own self without looking towards the heavens for guidance. That is, they can self-worship rather than worshipping one God. So this is like Iblisi's spirituality, which Kant preached, and which Enlightenment in general preaches. So we can see how this sort of spirituality sees humanity in stages. So when they look towards the God, or they look towards the heavens, looked towards the revelation and ilham and through dreams, they were immature. They were heteronymous because they didn't determine their own self. Their self was determined by guidance from the heaven, or what they assumed to be heaven. So that's obvious how the adoption of the so-called empirical attitude is an indispensable stage for in the spiritual life of humanity in the Kantian Iblisi Shaitani sense. But it's not clear how, in the Islamic sense, empirical attitude. Firstly, we can't accept this stage theory that there are stages of spiritual. There are stages of in the spiritual life of humanity. Humanity has been given access to the true spirituality from day one. So there are no stages in that sense. So Quran rejects the notion of stages of spirituality, and obviously Quran rejects the view that earlier period of human history were that of immaturity or inferior to what came after. And obviously Quran rejects the idea that self-determination is some sort of a panacea. In fact, self-determination is a form of iblisiyat, self-worship, which is what Shaitan wanted Hazrat Adam alayhi salam to adopt. So whatever Iqbal may think, it doesn't seem that the Quran has any such notion. Quran rejects the notion of indispensable stages in the spiritual life of humanity, and its attendant theories, which we just mentioned. But does it attach equal importance to all the regions of human experience as yielding knowledge of the ultimate reality?